Okay, so I think we left off with prasadam. Is that where we left off?
Yeah. In the right hand and left hand.
And whenever mahaprasad is offered to you, then you take it. Right? Did we talk about that?
Mm-hmm.
You should take honor immediately. Then also garlands and other forms of maha. Yeah. Put to your head. Smell, wear in your ear the flower. Honor the flower garlands. And then you dispose of them ideally in the ocean or lake. So prasada means Krishna's mercy. And everything that's offered to him is his mercy. So the ghee lamp is prasadam, and the water. And you'll see in India people are very anxious to get the mercy, right? They'll always go forward to get the water. They'll bang into you to get the water, to get the, right? They'll do anything to get the prasadam. So of course their motive may be to go to the higher planets or something, we don't know, but they understand the importance of prasadam. So, what happened to my document? Oh. So now, did we talk about attending arati? So we're going to talk about arati. Now, when arati is offered, you notice there's a bell. You ring a bell. That's music. And that's music for Krishna. That's why you ring the bell. In South India, when they have arati, in many places in South India, there's no kirtan. There's just bells. Big bells. Ding, 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 bow, 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 bow.
They chant?
No, just bells. Just making music for the deity. And sometimes drums. And I was in a temple in South India, I think it was Udupi, place of Madhvacharya. And in the temple they had a saxophone player, and a clarinet player, and I think a tabla or some kind of drum. And they would serenade the deities, doing their ragas, kind of like a fusion between rag and jazz. So that's for the pleasure of the deities. And in Mayapur, Prabhupada had, during the morning, he had Shanai players. You know Shanai? What Shanai is? It's like kind of like a mini saxophone. They had two Shanai players and tabla player. And as far as I remember, they were sitting up in the gate to the entrance of the property, and they would play, because Prabhupada said it created an auspicious atmosphere. So they'd play their Shanai music. And today, in Prabhupada's Samadhi in Mayapur, they have recordings of those. So during japa, you hear recordings of those men playing Shanai and tabla that go along with the japa, create an auspicious atmosphere. Interesting, isn't it? Yeah. And there's some japa tapes of Prabhupada, and they have japa tapes with the Shanai in the background, or japa CDs, or japa downloads, or whatever you call it today. recordings, japa recordings. And they have the Shanai there because that's what was played in Mayapur. So if you ever hear that recording, that's how you know. Now, when you're offering different items to Krishna, you're offering something for smelling, like incense and flower, and something for the eye, like the light, fan. You're offering things for the different senses, but you're also offering the 5 elements. Earth, water, fire, air. I don't know about ether, but you're offering the different elements in arati. Did you know that? Srila Prabhupada emphasizes in Nectar of Devotion the benefit of seeing the arati performed. In the Skanda Purana, there is the following description of the result of seeing arati. If someone sees the face of the Lord while arati is going on, he can be relieved of all sinful reactions, coming from many, many thousands and millions of years past. He is even excused from the killing of a Brahmana. So, of course, that's not why we go to arati. But it just shows the power of it. Now, deity worship is one of the items of devotional service. One of the main items. Of the 5 main items, that's one of them. The 5 main items of bhakti. Which are hearing, chanting, living in a holy place, associating with devotees, and worshipping the deity. So it's one of the 5 main items. So worship of the deity means that you attend arati. That means you're worshipping the deity just by being there. So you say, I'm not on the altar, so I'm not worshipping the deity, or I'm not a Brahmin, so I can't worship the deity. But if you attend the arati, that's deity worship. And then deity worship helps your japa, because it purifies you. So, okay. Okay, honoring mahaprasad. Well, maybe we read this. Nirmalya, we read this, right? Refers to garlands, flowers, chandan, which is sandalwood, bathwater, ghee lamp, tulsi leaves, that the pujari offers to the Lord during puja. One should not disrespect the prasad by leaving it in an unclean place or stepping on it. We read this, right? Yeah. Then we read about taking charnamrita. You can take like this, touch to your head. Because both hands means you're respecting with your entire body. When you're offering, like when you offer a flower, like when we offer to Prabhupada, the flower represents yourself or your soul, and then you're surrendering. So when you offer the flower, you're offering yourself in surrender. Okay. The water from the lotus feet of Sri Radha and Krishna. ¿Entiendes? Lotus feet? Pied, what? Pied Pie de loto. Bestows pure loving devotion. Having drunk that water with great joy, I hold that water upon my head. It's a mantra. You can chant when you take Charnamrita. Taking the water gives pure devotion, and having drunk the water with great joy, I hold that water in my head, means I have so much respect for that, the power of that water. That's washed the deity. So we talked about the ghee lamp, and in many temples they have a Garuda in the back of the temple. And if you read Chaitanya Charitamrita, you'll see that Mahaprabhu stood by Garuda to take darshan. Because they say that he stood by the Garuda deity statue. Because Mahaprabhu would look at Garuda. Jagannath would look at Garuda. So if you stand by Garuda, then he'll see you. And it says here that the ghee lamp should be taken to Garuda, but of course we take to Prabhupada first.
Garuda would take darshan from Lord Chaitanya?
No, Lord Jagannath would see Garuda, and then Lord Chaitanya would stand next to Garuda because he knew Jagannath would see Garuda, so he'd see him. That's what I understand. Then we had talked about deity clothing, wearing deity clothing as prasadam, putting it on your head, respecting it. Same with mahaprasadam. Yeah, we talked about don't touch books, beads, kartals, anything to the floor or your feet. If you touch it, if they touch the floor or your feet, then you take that item and you put it to your head. See? You touch another devotee, especially if your feet touch another devotee, then you touch the devotee. That's say, I'm sorry. Excuse me. So, well, I thought we didn't discuss all these things. Kirtan. We didn't discuss Kirtan, right?
No.
We talked about not wasting Krishna's money, energy, leaving lights on, water dripping. I was told there's a story, Prabhupada was on a morning walk and some water was leaking out of a faucet, an outside faucet of someone's home, and he came and he turned it off. And that we told the story where the fan was left on and the room was locked in Mayapur, and he was called as crazy and demanded they open the room, and they didn't know who left it on, who had the key. It was a whole fiasco. He said it's a kind of craziness. You leave lights on and then you go out of the room, or you leave the fan on, you go out of the room. So he didn't like to waste Krishna's energy. And there's this famous story of Prabhupada had to mail a letter in Vrindavan. So then he asked the devotee, what's the price of a rickshaw and what's the price of mailing the letter? So the price of mailing the letter was like 50 paisa cheaper. So then he said, then mail the letter. Instead of have a rickshawala, you pay 50 paisa more for a rickshawala, he could deliver it. So just mail the letter, save 50 paisa. And then the next moment he might sign a check of $50,000 for construction on the temple. So, it wasn't like he didn't spend money, he just didn't like wasting money. But there's an interesting story. When Prabhupada wanted to get the land in Juhu, as far as I understand the story, the man was charging too much. But Prabhupada wanted the land, and so he was just willing to pay whatever to get the land. And he knew he was paying too much. Of course, now it's probably worth 100 times more. So, when he could save money, even 50 paisa, he would save it. But for preaching and what was necessary, he'd be willing to spend even if he knew he was being cheated, but that land was important, so he was willing to pay. Okay, now we're talking about Kirtan. Now, this again is from India, and India, their standards, by our perception, and no offense to Indians, can seem a bit fanatical, or a little too strict, or different culture. I think it's probably normal for them, but for us, it might feel a little awkward. So take that into consideration when we're discussing this, because this Vaishnava etiquette class was all I could find. I thought I had another one on my computer, but when I brought it up, I couldn't read the font. It was like from 20 years ago. So, this is what I found. Only lead kirtan when they ask you. So if you're in the temple alone, it's time for kirtan. Lead kirtan even if no one asks you. But I did hear something that Prabhupada once said. He said only initiated devotees should lead kirtan for the deities. Now, that's not followed in ISKCON. Maybe I'm the only one who heard it. But I understood that leading kirtan for the deity is like doing puja, or like cooking. But that would probably create a riot if we tried to instill that in what's the word? Instill? Establish that standard. That would, because everyone wants to lead. I don't know. I could be wrong. I won't try to establish that standard myself. The Prema Dhwani prayers, Jayam Vishnupad, should be recited by the senior most devotee. So I guess that means if you're leading kirtan and there's a senior devotee there, then when you finish, let them recite the Prema Dhwani. You know Prema Dhwani prayers? What that is? Jayam Vishnupad. That's called Prema Dhwani. Okay, let's see who's on the Christian.com, what they're up to. Okay. Antonio has to go at 8. Hare Krishna, everybody. And, okay. The Prema Dhwani prayers are standardized the way Prabhupada chanted them. Some devotees go off and chant so many things. Generally, we should follow what Prabhupada did. Okay, here's an important one. There are standard melodies to be sung at specific times of the day. In particular, in the morning program, the Samshara Dhava prayers and the Hare Krishna mantra should be sung in what we call the morning melody. Who knows the morning melody? Now, I've been here with you for I don't know how many Mangalartiks. So, you should know one thing. When I lead Kirtan, I do it, especially when I lead here, as an example. But I kind of do it everywhere I go, because a lot of devotees, they don't know all the standards. So the way I led Mangalartik, if you'll notice, it was exactly the same every time. Because that's the way you do it. So you don't change it. There's a morning melody. Samshara Dava Nalali Dhaloka Tranaya Kayon Naganaganatam Praptasya Kalyana Gunanavasya Vande Guru Sri Charanharavindam. That's the morning melody. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prashnaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Shaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesa Shunyavadi Paschacha Deshatarine Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Sivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. That's the morning melody, and it's not Gadadhar. It's not Gadadhar, it's Gadadhar. Gadadhar, not Gadadhar. It's Gadadhar. Prabhupada would chant Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasari Gaur. That's another way of doing it. But generally in Mayapur, I basically chant the way they chant in Mayapur because I live there. And that's what I hear. Could somebody give me some water? Because I feel like there's something in my throat. Poquito, poquito. There's a demon in my throat. Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrind. Not Gadadhar. And here in Mexico, they have their syncopation in some kirtans is completely weird. So you're learning some things the wrong way. The way they sing Guru Puja, it's not right. I don't know about the other kirtans, but anyway. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. That's the melody you sing at Mangalartik. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Now, for all of those who are listening who want to learn Kirtan expertly, then there are some derivatives of that melody which you can chant later on in the Kirtan. So, the standard melody, morning melody, you chant at Mangalarti. There's no other melody. But there's derivatives of that melody. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. That's a derivative. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Then something else snuck in later on in ISKCON. I don't think it's bona fide, but people chant it. And I'll tell you why I don't think it's bona fide. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. I'll tell you two reasons that I don't think it's bona fide. One very good reason is they don't sing it in Mayapur. Mayapur is kind of our standard for Kirtan. And the Mayapur Kirtaniers, many of them have been doing Kirtan since they were in the cradle. Because Kirtan that's what goes on in Mayapur. And I go to Mangalarti every day, and I've never heard any Bengali sing that. So I'm making my case to the world right now. Of course, who cares what I say, but I'll say it anyway. There's a sect of Vaishnavas who Prabhupada didn't appreciate as being genuine. And their style of Kirtan is Krishna. And as far as I understand, Prabhupada didn't appreciate that kind of Kirtan, where you extend the last syllable. Hare Krishna. He didn't, as far as I understand, he didn't appreciate it. But even if you want to contend on that Prabhupada never led Kirtan that way. Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. That's different than Hare. So he never did that, and that's what that song's doing. So, based on the fact that no Bengali Kirtanier, the most expert Kirtaniers are in Bengal, they don't chant like that. And Prabhupada doesn't chant like that. And nobody chanted that melody during Prabhupada's time. It somehow slipped in. So a lot of these kirtans slip in from these groups that Prabhupada didn't like, that some ISKCON devotee hears, and he brings it in, and everyone starts hearing it, and it becomes part of the top 10 kirtans, and then people start doing it. At least that's what it seems like. Anyway, now, something to add to this discussion. At least in Mayapur, and you can do this anywhere, Prabhupada said we should chant the song Hari Haraya Nama Krishna Jadavaya Nama. This was the first song Lord Chaitanya sang when he started his Kirtan movement. When he inaugurated his movement. Hari Haraya Nama Krishna Jadavaya Nama Hari Gopa Govindaram Sri Madhusudan. So, it's a long song. These are 2 lines from the song, and Prabhupada said, the Hare Krishna mantra, the Panchatattva mantra, And this song should always be heard in Mayapur. So in Mayapur, we chant this. This is the way Prabhupada wanted at the end of the Kirtan. Right at the end of the Kirtan, before the arati is finished. Hari Haraya Nama Krishna Jadhavaya Nama Hari Gopal Govinda Ram Sri Madhusudan. Now, so that Prabhupada requested we chant. So we chant that at the end of Mangalarti in Mayapur. I once didn't chant it, and Baba Nanda, who used to be running the whole show there, said, you should chant that mantra. Now, what about Nitai Gaur Hari Bol? And what about Yai Yai Prabhupada? For those of you who are from Mexico, the J's become Y, so they say Yai Yai, not Jai Jai. Correcto? Yai Yai Prabhu. Yai Yai Chant Yapa. Yai Chante Yapa. Yai Prabhupada Chante Yapa. Correcto? Yai Yai Prabhupada. Prabhupada. I know from living in Los Angeles and San Diego. So this question came up to Prabhupada, and we, in his presence, we chanted Nitai Gaur Hari Bol, and we chanted Yai Yai Prabhupada, and we also chanted Jai Jai Prabhupada. So, if you're from Mexico, and you want to be an authentic devotee, you can chant Jai Jai instead of Yai Yai. Because Jai is a Sanskrit or Bengali word, so you can pronounce it like Sanskrit and Bengali and say Jai. And create a revolution in Mexico, pronouncing words properly. So, and people chanted other mantras in Prabhupada's presence. So Prabhupada was asked, he said, well, there's no harm in chanting, but the main thing is Kirtan. So, you chant Jai Jai Prabhupada for 15 minutes. No, that's not proper. Prabhupada himself never chanted, so if you don't chant, you won't go to hell. It's not that you have to chant.
He never chanted
Jai Prabhupada, no, he never chanted, or Nitai Gaur. That's more of a tradition in Gaudiya Math. That's where we learned it, in ISKCON, because before we learned Kirtan in India, we didn't chant that, we learned that in India. And we learned from Mayapur, Jai Nitai Gauranga, Nitai Gauranga, Jai Sachinandan, Jai Sachinandan, these kinds of kirtans. Right? So, it's not that Prabhupada stopped it, but sometimes you get in this Radhe Radhe Sham Sham Radhe Radhe Sham Sham, going on and on and on, and we don't have an example of Prabhupada teaching that. Radharani's appearance day, all right, some ecstasy is overcoming us. We can't control ourselves. Radhe, Radhe. But Prabhupada taught us Kirtan. Now, one very interesting thing is Ram, the appearance day of Lord Ram. And you have mantras. Raghupati Raghava Raja Ram Potita Pavana Shitaram Sitaram Jaya Sitaram Sitaram Jaya Sitaram. Prabhupada never chanted that. So if you go around ISKCON on Lord Ramchandra's appearance day, probably that will be chanted. One appearance day of Lord Ramchandra, I was leading the evening kirtan, and everyone was waiting for me to chant that, and I didn't chant it, and they got frustrated with me. They got their sticks and were beating me up. And I said, Prabhupada said, don't chant that. Even on, and he said, you don't chant that on Ramchandra's appearance day. Chant Hare Krishna. Because everything is contained in the Hare Krishna mantra. And Ram's name is there also. Now, anywhere you go in ISKCON, this is probably not followed. And they'll beat you with sticks also if you don't chant it on his appearance day. But I heard Prabhupada say this. And I've never heard him chant this mantra. Maybe I'm wrong, but I've never heard. I've heard him chant Govinda Jai Jai, Gopala Jai Jai. I've heard him chant Krishna 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 Hey. But I've never heard him chant Raghupati Raghava. Now, so one may say, is it such a bad thing? Will I lose my piety and take another birth? Of course not. But I think Prabhupada's making the point, everything is in the Mahamantra. Yeah. And our connection is with Radha and Krishna. So we're not worshipping Ram. But we honor him on his appearance day. We're inspired by him, but everything's within Krishna. So we worship Ram by worshipping Krishna.